question was exactly, as I presented it, are children an oppressed class, and what can be done about it? Now, I saw people talking about children being oppressed, and I had the view of like, come on, what are you talking about? Like, you're using the wrong words here to talk about what you're trying to talk about. Like, you're being sort of hyperbolic. And then I thought about it a little bit more, and I sort of engaged with what people were saying, and it's really hard to argue that children, to some extent, aren't an oppressed class. And generally, the reason that we don't see them as an oppressed class, I would say, is because we don't see them as full people, right? And I've made jokes about kids not being people yet, or this child I know is finally becoming a person because they're getting a personality and they're getting independent and stuff, or teenagers, they're not full people, not yet, little jokes here and there, right? Now, that is genuinely how we view people who are under the age of 18 or sometimes under the age of 21, right? And what I mean by our children an oppressed class is less, I guess, say about, let's say, your sort of example of, even if there's not sort of structural oppression or systemic oppression, rather, there could still be a whole bunch of racist about. It's more sort of looking at the rights that children have and how we view and talk about the rights of children. Now, the rights of children might sound a bit weird to you because we don't often talk about child rights. We tend to talk about parental rights. So this is somewhat relevant to this month in that I have been in a lot of conversations with people who talk about, why they don't want LGBT teachers talking to kids about not being straight, because it's the parent's decision what the child learns. It's up to the parent what the child is allowed to learn, blah blah blah, all of this and that. That is insane. It's genuinely insane if you reframe it to think about the child as a person and not as a property of the parent, right? And the reason that it's insane is because we know that if you don't teach kids about LGBTQ plus people and they're in an environment where, LGBTQ plus people are being discriminated against, at home or whatnot, they're likely going to grow up to discriminate against LGBTQ plus people themselves. If there's prejudice around them, they're probably going to take that in, On top of that, if they're LGBTQ plus themselves and they're in that environment, it's going to be bad for them. But even if they're not necessarily in that environment, if they're not in an environment where they're taught about this sort of stuff, where they learn about it, they're going to have difficulty coming to terms with themselves, right? Potentially, right? You're going to make their lives easier by saying, hey, these people exist. This is okay. And it could be you. It could not be you. But if it is you, that's fine, right? You won't have kids that, have crushes on people and don't realize it's a crush until they're in their 20s and oh, God, that's what that was. That makes sense. I just didn't have the words for it because I wasn't supposed to have a crush on that kind of person. Now, my point here is that we can see quite plainly that the well-being of children, is sort of bettered with that sort of education. And it's not just me that thinks that. I've had a bloody look at the English curriculum, my dear Luke. The English curriculum, if it's not been changed, by the bloody Tories in the next few months, the English curriculum actually does specifically talk about LGBTQ plus people in both primary school and in high school. What I'm saying here is that the curriculum literally talks about teaching kids about LGBTQ plus people so for primary school it's health and social education, I think, health and personal and health education.
PSHE.
No, because in high school it's personal health and sex education. Now you can have sex education in primary school, but your parents can opt out of it. In high school your parents cannot opt out of it. The sex education is largely just for kids in primary school. It's here's the anatomy and then this is how babies are made, basically precursor to what you'll be learning in science anyway, right? Very basic stuff. But in the relationships part of that, because a big part of primary school is teaching kids how to be people, which is what people are saying they want teachers to do. They want them to be prepared for the world. You need to be prepared for the world by being an actual bloody person. What they do is they say, okay, they need to learn about relationships. They need to learn about different groups of people. They need to learn about stereotypes and why stereotypes are bad. And specifically mentioned are LGBTQ plus people multiple times throughout that. It mentions, people might have different families that look different, for example, with two parents of the same gender or whatever. And it specifically says, you should be teaching kids about this. And, for religious schools, you can teach about you can teach about the religious viewpoints and whatnot. You can teach about different viewpoints, but you need to teach the law initially to begin with. Say this is what's legal, this is what's not. And you also are not, like it specifically says, you should not be doing this in one lesson. It needs to be throughout the sort of course, as every other sort of thing is. You can't just take all the gay stuff, the LGBTQ stuff, and shove it in one day and have that be it, right? Like the curriculum for England and Wales, as I've read, seems half decent, right? It could be better, but it seems half decent. Now, my point here is that all of this is to say, this is a lot, I know, but all of this is to say that even bloody England and Wales, the curriculum there says learning about LGBTQ plus people is important for children's development, right? So why is there ever a conversation about parental rights to restrict children from that knowledge when we know that it's beneficial to them? Yeah.
Because politicians make disingenuous arguments about authoritarian leftist state. Probably. That's probably why. I mean, we've already talked before about whether the government has the right to overrule the parent and all that kind of stuff, and the kind of messy political situation that creates because of people wanting to teach their kids myths as truth, as literal, universal. This is the universe. This is what the world is.
But why can't they do that if the kids are their property? They're their kids.
Yeah, well, that's the conversation, isn't it? Why can't they? Because we have a better understanding of stuff that probably kind of encapsulates that other stuff, and you can't really encapsulate. So, like, if, for example, if you take the idea that, okay, the world is 26 turtles stacked on top of each other. But you can't see those turtles. I mean, I'm using that as an example because there are legitimately people who have believed that. It is unprovable because the turtles are whatever, like they're in another dimension, or they're metaphysical turtles, or they're invisible and unable to be detected by our turtleless technology. Yeah. Whatever you want, like you can believe that all you like. And a lot of the time, these kind of like concepts, they are sort of self-reinforcing in that they're like, they specifically, the reason they have survived across multiple generations is because they have evolved over a long time to sort of be self-reinforcing and also be like immune to criticism by saying like, well, but where's the evidence? And it's like, well, the evidence, you don't need evidence because it's about faith, and faith is a virtue in and of itself, and you will be rewarded for that, and if you don't have faith, then you go to hell forever. So it's like, it's just like that you can.
I hate that.
You can at least think that through, reason that through as like, okay, that feels like it might be sort of a structure, like a mimetic belief structure that is just reinforcing itself and is immune to criticism. And those things evolve over time in the same way that genes evolve over time. And that idea, the idea that an idea can evolve over time, can encapsulate and explain many other ideas. Whereas the other idea is the idea like, oh, well, there's 26 turtles and one of the turtles hates you and one of the turtles loves you. I don't know about the turtle myth. I have no idea what it is. But like, if you map
that's it. One of the turtles hates me, Corey will, and one of them really likes me.
All the turtles hate you, Corey. But anyway, so you can map. I'm doing a very long-winded explanation here.
Even Michelangelo, Luke? Even Michelangelo, the Ninja Turtle?
Michelangelo's the top turtle, and he's told all the other turtles to hate you.
I always knew that Donnie was a bottom. I'm sorry, continue. Go on. Go on.
So, I don't know. Don't know perfectly where I'm going with this, but I'm trying to use the turtle idea to go like, okay, does a parent have the right to tell the child that the universe is 26 turtles stacked on top of each other? And also tell the child that if anyone else tells you that's not true, they are like possessed by another thing that we don't know, we can't see, the evil turtle, right? And also all those turtles, if you're really good, then those turtles will reward you with an infinite time of happiness and peace and love. But you also I can't prove you that either. Like, but
also if you doubt it, then you're not going to get that.
Yes.
You need to be committed fully.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's a no-go.
And all I'm saying is I think there are reasons and ways to explain why that belief system exists and propagates itself that are more likely than that's the fundamental truth of reality and it's just impossible to prove it.
Yeah. I guess to be honest with you, Luke, this is a really difficult conversation for me to have. Not because, I'm like, oh, it's hard. I mean, as I've mentioned before, I've never really sort of believed in God in any real sense. I mean, in any meaningful sense. I remember praying. This is probably an ADHD thing. I remember praying and just being like kind of bored, not really sure what was going on. Chatting, like wondering what's everyone else doing? Why are they all having these chats with God and all that nonsense? The only reason I would pray for things every now and then when I was absolutely desperate for something is because I saw that they did it on The Simpsons. I was like, yeah, I'll do that. That seems like a good last ditch effort. A Hail Mary. Like I never fully believed. It was always for me just a case of just in case, right? Like I mean, I seems a bit. But everyone around, like literally every other person I know, says that this is a thing. So I guess maybe what if it is? I may as well pretend. And then at some point I was like, I'm done pretending. This is. I was quite young as well. I think it was like 7 or 8 or whatever. I'm like, this is nonsense. I can't. So when it comes from a sort of like, I guess, and I'm going to use the word indoctrinating because I think it's an accurate word. Indoctrinating a child into some sort of like belief system or religion or whatever. I struggle to, I guess, not empathize, but like understand what that would be like, because I've never had my worldview kind of shattered like that, because it never stuck with me. But what you were saying was interesting to me there, in that it got me thinking, right? So the obvious question that sort of posed is, well, why are you allowed to indoctrinate my child with LGBTQ plus ideology? Why are you allowed to indoctrinate my child with this transgenderism, the religious cult of transgenderism, right? And I'm not allowed to teach my child about Christ, or about Muhammad and the Quran, or about Moses and the Torah, or about Ganesha and the scrolls of something. I don't know. Guru Nanak is about as well. He's for something else. Sikhism, I think. Anyway, my point is, why I got lost there. My point is, people will often ask, why am I allowed to tell my child? Why are you allowed to tell my child that the LGBTQ people are fine and being trans is okay and all that stuff? Your religious cult, but I'm not allowed to do mine. The key difference here, you're not listening to this if you're a bigot, because you wouldn't pay us if you're a bigot, realistically, probably. But the key difference, if you're ever in this position, is that one of them is preaching being open in who you are, and the other one is preaching do what I say. Yeah,
but crucially, if it turned out, and I think you'd probably agree with this, look, there are 2 things I would say here. The first one, so can you remind me in case I forget? It's about companies, right? Anyway, so the first one is, like, if it turned out in 100 years, 200 years, 300 years from now that we have a better explanation as to why people experience gender dysphoria, why people experience the things they experience, then teaching people things that don't explain that very well anymore, or it can be better explained in a different way, would also not be good, right? If we had a better way of an understanding and conceptualizing of ourselves and our relationship to gender and how that links to all the other things we have, like that would also not be cool, right?
Yeah, no. My philosophy, my belief system, I would say is largely evidence based, and I say largely because I would love it to be entirely evidence-based, but I'm a silly little monkey boy, and with a silly little monkey brain, and so I can't be entirely evidence-based. I can't trust myself to be that, but I do try, and I will change my opinion if I have to, because my opinion is not my opinion. My opinion is whatever the evidence says it should be.
But then equally on the other side, like, we are indoctrinating kids all the time, because we live in a society. What's that reference from? What does that mean from? I can't remember.
Oh, what is it? It's like the Joker meme. Like, we live in a society. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that about us indoctrinating kids is that we live in a society that has a certain bunch of rules about underlying structures of our society, concepts like ownership, concepts like companies, which are only invented about less than 200 years ago, I think.
Well, no shit, capitalism's barely fucking
right. But the idea, it wasn't long ago that we conceptualized of, let's create an entity that can act as an agent, that can have its own bank account, that can take loans, that can own property,
that can remove the risk from the individual who's running it,
and that doesn't have any physical existence itself. We teach that as like a basic truth of the world that never goes it goes unquestioned. We never go, unless you then do like economics, or if you do like politics or something, we never sit the kids down and go, right, so like a bunch of this stuff that we think of as true, it's not technically true, it's just very efficient. Like we do that really, like it helps us work better as people and collaborate better because we're ultimately, monkeys.
Yeah.
We don't do that. And so we are like, that's the indoctrination of kids thing going on. The idea of like even just capitalism, the idea of like, and you can argue all day, for as long as you like, whether capitalism is the correct thing to do, but it is not objectively true that a person can own a thing and can restrict other people from owning that, from using that thing, other than through threat of force, right? That's literally not true. Right?
Yeah, but then this is the... Sorry, if you've got more to say, by all means, I think the threat of force is something we're so blind to because we consider the police as a peacekeeping thing, for example, right? They help us.
But I don't even mean threat of force. What I mean is that, okay, so say there is a computer, right? Say I have a computer. Again, even the language we use has, I have a computer. Even that is like already a lie, right? Mm-hmm. There is a computer and I've put the computer in this room, right? Other people come and want to use the computer. The only way I actually, in the real base world, have of stopping them from using that computer, if it is my opinion that it is my computer, is to beat them up or get somebody else to beat them up, right?
It was to physically stop them, really. Not necessarily beating up, but like physically stopping them, from doing the thing.
Yeah, and so things like the court system, the police, all those kind of things, they don't literally physically stop us from doing those things. They don't literally physically enforce most of the rules, but the ultimate fear that they would or could enforce the rules means that we all sort of run the same software of ownership and things like that, which aren't objectively true.
But also that we're taught, and this is something I found really interesting, it was in that capitalism book that I sort of read, The Origins of Capitalism. When I tried to find a book about the origins of capitalism from a capitalist perspective, and I really struggled, and then I ended up finding a Marxist one.
Brilliant.
But it was really good. No, because you're not going to find a book about the origin. You're going to be hard pressed to find a book about the origin of capitalism from a capitalist, because a capitalist will tell you that capitalism is innate human behavior, and that's exactly what it is. And so it never sprung into existence. What happened was all of the things that were sort of fettering it were removed, and then it was it's like when did the river form? No, the river's just running. We've just had a dam up. So I guess when you removed the dam, the river formed, but the river was always there. That's what a capitalist will say about capitalism, right? They'll say that it was always there underlying, and we just kind of removed the stuff that was physically restraining it. It's human nature. It's not though. It's like it's very clearly fundamentally like provably not human nature to be sort of capitalist by virtue of the fact that charity fucking exists, right? Like by virtue of the fact that people will just volunteer to do stuff. By virtue of that, if you give people UBI, they still do things, they people just want to be able to survive. And if we're at a point in society where we can do that without, forcing people to do shit they really don't want, we don't need to talk about why capitalism doesn't work. We could bring it back in. But indoctrination, you said that we do indoctrinate kids. And as societally speaking, yes, we do. So indoctrination, definition, process of teaching a person or group to accept a set of beliefs uncritically. This is the thing. This is what gets me, right? I wouldn't really say that I indoctrinate because I try to tell people to be critical. I try to teach people to be critical. I tell people to tell me when I'm wrong. I tell people, don't just take my arguments. Think about them for yourself, right? Because this is what bothers me about the whole sort of putting religion up against being like fucking LGBTQ plus, right? Putting these two things on the same level is that it's not just the aspect of one of them says, be who you are. And that's it, right? Because I think I'll get to it in a second. But like one of them, it's not just the fact that one of them says be who you are, and the other one says be who I tell you to be, or be who you want to be who you are within this strict set of guidelines. It's not just that aspect of it. It's also the aspect of one of them just says, like, do what I say. We have all the answers, and the answers will never change. Whereas the other one is just like, man, we don't know all that much, like, come on, like, we can't be, as people, we can't be so arrogant as to believe that we understand the full complexity of our brain and the rest of our biology, that we understand like everything there is to know, to be so prescriptive as to tell people this is what you need to do. So the whole sort of LGBTQ plus thing, the whole queer thing, the whole pride movement, all of that is just about, hey, being open to people who are being themselves without hurting other people. And I just can't see that as being a bad, like, I can't see any scenario where doing what you want, so long as it does not cause harm to others or, you know, significant harm to yourself in certain contexts, I can't see a scenario where that's a bad thing, you know?
No,
right? Like, it's hard. It's like, I've tried. I have genuinely tried, and I can't.